Brielle Carter stared at her reflection in the mirror of the ladies' room at Morton's Steakhouse. Her hands trembled as she smoothed down her black dress, the nicest one she owned. Even after losing 30 pounds, she still felt out of place. In this fancy restaurant, where stick-thin socialites dined on tiny salads. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just dinner." But it wasn't just dinner. It was dinner with Ethan Remington, one of New York's most eligible bachelors. The man whose steel grey eyes had been following her for weeks at the charity events she helped organize. The man who had finally asked her out, making her wonder if she was dreaming. Taking a deep breath, Brielle walked back to their private table, trying to ignore the whispers and stares from other diners. She knew what they were thinking. What was a man like Ethan doing with someone like her? Ethan stood as she approached, his perfectly tailored suit highlighting his tall, athletic frame. His dark hair was styled just right, and his smile could melt any woman's heart. But there was something else in his expression tonight, something calculating that Brielle missed completely. "I ordered us some champagne," he said, pulling out her chair. "We're celebrating." Brielle's heart skipped a beat. Celebrating what? Instead of answering, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The restaurant went silent. Brielle's hands flew to her mouth as he got down on one knee. "Brielle Carter, will you marry me?" The ring was massive, a stunning diamond that caught every light in the room. Brielle couldn't breathe. They'd only been dating for 2 months. This had to be a dream. But we barely know each other," she stammered. Ethan's smile never wavered. "I know everything I need to know. You're kind, genuine, and beautiful. You're nothing like the fake people in my world. Say yes, Brielle. Let me give you the life you deserve." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." The restaurant erupted in applause, but Brielle didn't notice the smirks on some faces or the phones recording the moment. She was too busy living her fairy tale. What she couldn't see was Ethan's quick glance toward a specific table where his ex-wife Victoria sat with her new husband. Victoria's perfect face had turned white with shock. Phase 1 of Ethan's plan was complete. The wedding was a rushed affair, planned in just 6 weeks. Brielle wanted something simple, but Ethan insisted on a huge celebration at the Plaza Hotel. He wanted everyone to see them exchange vows. "You're going to be a Remington now," he told her. "Everything has to be perfect." Perfect meant a designer dress that cost more than Brielle's yearly salary. Perfect meant hundreds of guests she didn't know. Perfect meant magazine photographers, documenting every moment. Standing at the altar, Brielle felt like a princess in her flowing white gown. She'd lost another 15 pounds for the wedding, but she still didn't look like the other women in Ethan's social circle. It didn't matter. He loved her anyway, or so she thought. The reception was a blur of champagne, dancing, and congratulations from strangers. Victoria made an appearance, air-kissing Ethan's cheek and giving Brielle a cold once-over. "How unexpected," Victoria purred. "You always did like to make statements, darling." Brielle didn't understand the exchange, but Ethan's grip on her waist tightened. His smile looked more like a smirk. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in the Maldives. Ethan spent most of it on his phone, claiming work emergencies. Brielle tried not to feel disappointed. She told herself this was normal for a busy executive like him. Reality hit hard when they returned to New York. Ethan insisted they attend every social event, parade her around like a trophy. But at home he was distant, working late most nights. When she tried to cook him dinner, he barely touched the food. "I have a charity gala tonight," he announced one evening, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. "You should stay home. You've seemed tired lately." Brielle's heart sank. This was the 3rd event this week he'd gone to without her. "I'm your wife. Shouldn't I be there? You've made enough appearances lately. Besides, these things can be so tedious. You'd be bored." She watched him leave, feeling hollow inside. Later that night, scrolling through social media, she saw photos from the gala. Ethan was there, laughing with Victoria and other beautiful people. The comments below were cruel. "Guess he left the wife in her cage tonight. Where's his charity case? Victoria must be loving this whole revenge marriage. Revenge marriage." The words hit Brielle like a slap. She spent the whole night reading old articles, putting the pieces together. Ethan and Victoria's divorce had been brutal, splashed across every tabloid. She'd taken half his fortune, humiliated him publicly, then married his biggest business rival, and just 2 months later, he'd started pursuing Brielle. She was still sitting at the computer when Ethan came home at dawn, reeking of expensive scotch. He froze when he saw her face. "How long were you planning this?" she asked quietly. "Was any of it real? Brielle, tell me the truth." Her voice broke. "Did you ever love me at all?" Ethan's silence was answer enough. The perfect facade cracked, revealing the cruel truth beneath. "I needed everyone to see me happy," he finally said. "I needed Victoria to see I'd moved on. You were convenient." Brielle felt her world shatter. Every kiss, every tender moment, it had all been an act. She was just a pawn in his game of revenge. She stood up slowly, wiping away tears. "Convenient," she repeated. "Well, I won't be convenient anymore." As she walked to their bedroom to pack a bag, Ethan called after her. "Don't be dramatic. You got everything you wanted. The money, the lifestyle, the name. Isn't that enough?" Brielle turned to face him one last time. "I wanted love, Ethan. Real love. And that's the one thing you can't fake." She left that night with nothing but her clothes and her dignity. The media would have a field day, but she didn't care anymore. Her fairy tale had turned into a nightmare. But this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. 3 months after leaving Ethan, Brielle sat in her tiny studio apartment, staring at the divorce papers. Her lawyer had highlighted where she needed to sign. One signature, and she'd walk away with nothing. Exactly what she wanted. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan's sister, Charlotte. "Please talk to him. He's a mess without you." Brielle deleted it without responding. She'd received dozens of these messages, all saying the same thing. Ethan wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, was drinking too much. But she couldn't bring herself to care. Not anymore. The apartment might have been small, but it was hers. She'd found a job at a small marketing firm, and even though the pay was nothing like what she'd had as Mrs. Remington, it felt good to earn her own money again. Her phone rang. This time, it was Marcus Chen, her new boss. "Brielle, I need you in the office. Remember that pitch you worked on for the Williams account? They want to see it. Today." Her heart raced. This was her chance to prove herself. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. As she rushed to get ready, Brielle caught her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized herself anymore. The weight was melting off, not from dieting this time, but from stress and hard work. Her face looked sharper, her eyes harder. Gone was the soft, naive woman Ethan had married. The Williams meeting went better than she could have hoped. Her ideas were fresh, innovative. When she finished presenting, Mr. Williams stood up and shook her hand. "Impressive work, Ms. Carter. We'd like to move forward with your campaign." Marcus was beaming. "This is the biggest account we've landed all year. You just saved our quarter." Walking back to her desk, Brielle felt 10 feet tall. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about Ethan or the mess he'd made of her life. But life had other plans. "Did you see this?" Her co-worker Amy rushed over, tablet in hand. On the screen was a gossip site with Ethan's face splashed across it. The headline made Brielle's stomach turn. "Remington heir in hospital after overdose. Sources say marriage. Breakdown to blame." Below was a photo of Ethan being wheeled into Mount Sinai on a stretcher. He looked terrible, thin and pale, nothing like the powerful man she'd married. "You should call him," Amy said softly. "Whatever happened between you was a lie." Brielle cut her off. Everything was a lie. But that night, alone in her apartment, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The Ethan she'd fallen in love with, or thought she had, would never have been so reckless. Had she done this to him? Her phone rang again. "Charlotte." "Before you hang up," Charlotte's voice was desperate. "Just listen. I know what he did was unforgivable. But Brielle, there's something you don't know." "I know enough." "No, you don't. Victoria didn't just take his money in the divorce. She took his daughter." Brielle's world stopped. "What? Emily, she's 5. Victoria got full custody, moved her to London with her new husband. Ethan only gets to see her twice a year. The marriage, the revenge, it was never about the money. He wanted to hurt Victoria the way she hurt him, but he never meant to hurt you. Brielle sank onto her bed, mind spinning. A daughter. How had she not known? He wouldn't let anyone tell you, Charlotte continued. He was ashamed. The great Ethan, Remington losing everything that mattered. When he met you, you were so different from Victoria, so real. The plan started as revenge, but Brielle, I watched my brother fall in love with you for real. He just realized it too late. Tears rolled down Brielle's cheeks. Why are you telling me this now? Because the doctors say he might not make it through the night, and he's asking for you. The hospital corridor seemed endless. Brielle's heels clicked on the polished floor as she followed Charlotte to the ICU. Her hands were shaking. She didn't even know why she'd come. Through the window, she could see him. Ethan looked small in the hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines. His perfect hair was gone, replaced by a mess of dark curls. He'd lost the mask of power and control he always wore. Victoria was there, standing by his bed with their daughter. The little girl had Ethan's grey eyes. "Daddy," Emily was saying, "you have to wake up. You promised to take me to the zoo." Victoria looked up and saw Brielle. For a moment, something like guilt flashed across her perfect features. She gathered Emily close. "Come on, sweetheart, let's get some ice cream while Daddy rests." As they passed Brielle in the doorway, Victoria paused. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Brielle said nothing. She walked into the room slowly, taking in the monitors, the IV drips, the shell of the man she'd once loved. Ethan's eyes fluttered open. When he saw her, tears immediately filled them. "You came," he whispered. "I shouldn't have." "I know." His voice was weak. "I don't deserve it. I don't deserve you. I never did." Brielle sat in the chair by his bed, keeping her distance. "Why didn't you tell me about Emily?" "Because then you'd understand. You'd see how broken I was, how damaged. It was easier to be the villain." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I thought I could use you to hurt Victoria. Instead, I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. Pretty speeches won't fix this, Ethan. I know." His eyes were closing again, the medications pulling him under. "But I had to tell you, had to make you understand. I love you. Brielle, for real, too late, but for real." As his hand went limp in hers, the monitors started screaming. Nurses rushed in, pushing her aside. "Code Blue, get a crash cart in here." Brielle backed out of the room, heart pounding. She watched through the window as they fought to save Ethan's life. Her own emotions a storm she couldn't navigate. She'd come here for closure. Instead, she felt more confused than ever. The truth about Emily changed everything, and nothing. Ethan had still used her, still humiliated her, but now she understood why. The question was, could understanding lead to forgiveness? And even if it could, was love enough to rebuild what they'd broken? The doctors managed to save Ethan's life that night, but Brielle didn't stay to see him wake up. She left the hospital and threw herself into work, trying to forget the way his hand had felt in hers, trying to ignore the ache in her heart. 2 weeks passed. The Williams campaign was taking off, and Marcus had promoted her to senior account manager. She was too busy for regrets, too focused for tears. At least, that's what she told herself. "You've got another delivery," Amy announced, pointing to the roses on Brielle's desk. They came every day now, different colors, always with the same note. "I'm sorry, please, talk to me." Brielle dropped them in the trash like all the others, but this time something different fell out of the bouquet. A child's drawing done in crayon, a family portrait, a tall man, a little girl, and a woman with long brown hair, like Brielle's. "To my maybe mommy," the note read in wobbly letters. "Daddy says you make him happy. Please come back. Love, Emily." Brielle's hands shook as she stared at the drawing. The innocent hope in those crayon lines broke something inside. Her phone buzzed. A text from Charlotte. "He's being released today. Coming home to an empty house. Just thought you should know." That night, Brielle couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Emily's drawing, kept hearing Ethan's words in the hospital. At 3 in the morning, she made a decision. The security guard at Ethan's building remembered her, let her up without calling. She still had her key, but she knocked anyway. Ethan opened the door, looking like a ghost of himself. No designer suit, just wrinkled pajama pants and an old t-shirt. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face unshaved. "Brielle?" He whispered her name like a prayer. "We need to talk, really talk, no more lies." They sat in his living room, the city lights twinkling through the windows. The same room where they'd once planned their future, where everything had fallen apart. "Start with Emily," Brielle said. "Tell me everything." And he did. How he'd met Victoria in college, fallen hard and fast. The fairy tale wedding, Emily's birth, then Victoria's affairs, the ugly divorce, the custody battle he lost because Victoria's new husband had more money, more influence. "I watched my daughter being taken away," he said, voice breaking. "Victoria knew exactly how to hurt me. The money, I didn't care about that. But Emily, she was my whole world." "So you decided to hurt Victoria back by using me?" Ethan's hands were trembling. "At first, yes, you were everything Victoria wasn't. Kind, genuine, real. I thought if I married someone so different from her, it would drive her crazy. Show everyone she wasn't all that special. And it worked, didn't it?" Brielle's voice was bitter. "Everyone laughed at the fat girl who thought she could be a Remington. Victoria was humiliated. You got your revenge. But then something happened." Ethan moved closer, his eyes desperate. "Something I never planned for. You happened, Brielle. Your smile in the morning, the way you hummed while you cooked, how you actually listened when I talked. Before I knew it, the revenge didn't matter anymore. You did." "When?" she demanded. "When did it change? Remember that weekend at the beach house when we got caught in the rain coming back from dinner? You were laughing, dancing in the storm, not caring about your ruined dress or your makeup, so completely free. That's when I knew I was in trouble. That's when I realized I was falling in love with my own wife." Brielle remembered that night, the way he'd kissed her in the rain, held her like she was precious. "Had it been real even then? But you kept pushing me away," she said. "After we got back to the city, because I was a coward." He ran his hands through his messy hair. "The plan was working too well. Victoria was losing it, threatening to take Emily away completely. I panicked. Thought if I distanced myself from you, focused on the original plan, but I was just running from how I felt. And now? He laughed sadly. "Now I know what real love feels like. And I know what it's like to lose it. The drugs, the drinking, I wasn't trying to die, Brielle. I was trying to stop feeling this hole where you used to be." Tears were rolling down her cheeks now. "I can't just forgive you, Ethan. You broke my heart." "I know." He reached for her hand, then stopped himself. "I don't expect forgiveness. I need you to know the truth, all of it. And I need you to know that these past 3 months without you have been hell. Not because of the gossip or the scandal, but because I miss you. The real you. The woman I fell in love with for real." A small voice came from the hallway. "Daddy?" They both turned. Emily stood there in her pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Victoria's mother, who was watching her for the weekend, appeared behind her. "I'm sorry," the older woman said. "She had a nightmare." Emily's eyes lit up when she saw Brielle. "You came, just like in my picture." Before anyone could stop her, she ran to Brielle and threw her arms around her. "Are you going to be my new mommy now? Daddy's better when you're here." Brielle felt her heart crack open. She hugged the little girl back, meeting Ethan's eyes over her head. In them she saw hope, fear, and something else. Pure, unguarded love. The kind that couldn't be faked, the kind that might be worth fighting for. After that night, everything changed. Brielle didn't move back in with Ethan, but she agreed to try. Counseling. They started meeting twice a week with Dr. Sarah Martinez, trying to rebuild what they'd broken. Victoria wasn't happy about Emily's growing attachment to Brielle. She started making excuses to cancel Ethan's weekends with his daughter. The custody battle was heating up again. "She's using Emily to hurt us," Ethan raged one night after another cancelled visit. "Just like she used her to hurt me before." Brielle watched him pace his living room, noticing how he'd gained back the weight he'd lost, how the light was returning to his eyes. "Maybe we should talk to her, woman to woman. Victoria doesn't listen to anyone. She might listen to me. That's how." Brielle found herself sitting across from Victoria at the Four Seasons the next day. Victoria looked perfect as always in her designer suit, but there were shadows under her makeup. "You're making a mistake," Victoria said, stirring her untouched coffee. "Taking him back after what he did. Like you made a mistake taking his daughter." "The way." Victoria's perfectly manicured hand trembled. "You don't understand. When I married Richard, he promised to give Emily everything. The best schools, the best opportunities. She already had everything she needed. She had a father who loved her. Love doesn't pay for private school. Love doesn't open doors." Brielle leaned forward. "Is that what you really believe? That money matters more than love?" Something cracked in Victoria's perfect mask. "I grew up with nothing, watching my mother scrub floors to keep food on the table. I swore my daughter would never know that life. And now, are you happy, Victoria? Is Emily?" Tears appeared in Victoria's eyes. She wiped them away quickly. "She cries for him every night, begs to see him, and now she talks about you constantly. Her maybe mommy." She spat the words like they tasted bitter, then let her come home. "We can work out a better arrangement. Emily deserves to have all of us in her life." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Richard wants to move to London. Permanently. He says there are better opportunities there, and what do you want?" "I want..." Victoria's voice broke. "I want my daughter to stop hating me." Meanwhile, across town, Ethan was meeting with his lawyers. The custody battle had drained his accounts, but he didn't care. He'd sell everything he owned to keep Emily close. His phone buzzed. A text from Brielle. "Coming over?" Big news. She arrived an hour later, practically glowing. "I just had lunch with Victoria." Ethan tensed. What did she want? To make a deal. Joint custody. Emily stays in New York, splits time between both homes. "But there's a condition." "Of course there is. What does she want? Money? The summer house?" Brielle shook her head. "She wants us to all go to family counseling. You, me, her, Richard, for Emily's sake." Ethan stared at her in shock. "Victoria agreed to this?" "I think she's tired of fighting and..." Brielle smiled softly. "I think seeing you almost die scared her. Made her realize what Emily would lose." Ethan pulled Brielle into his arms, breathing in her familiar scent. "How do you do it? How do you make everything better?" "Because I see the good in people, even when they can't see it themselves." He pulled back to look at her. "Move back in with me." "Ethan, I know we're still working things out, but I miss you. Emily misses you. This place isn't home without you." Brielle touched his face gently. The face she'd fallen in love with twice now, once when it wore a mask and again when it showed its true self. "One condition," she said, "no more lies, ever." "No more lies," he promised. "No more games. Just us, building something real." That night, they had dinner with Emily. The little girl's eyes lit up when Brielle helped her with her homework, when they baked cookies together, when they all curled up on the couch to watch movies. It wasn't perfect. They still had a long way to go. But as Brielle watched Ethan reading Emily a bedtime story, his voice doing all the different character voices, she knew this was what she'd wanted all along. Not revenge. Not social status. Just this. A family built on love, forgiveness, and second chances. Later, lying in bed, Ethan held her close. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "No," she agreed, "but you're learning to." Outside their window, the city glittered like stars. Somewhere out there, Victoria was tucking Emily into her other bed, maybe thinking about the changes coming to their complicated family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in the quiet darkness, Brielle finally felt at peace. The fairy tale hadn't ended the way she expected. It had ended better, messy and real and true. 3 months into their new custody arrangement, things were finally settling into a rhythm. Emily spent weekdays with Victoria and weekends with Ethan and Brielle. The family counseling sessions, though tense at first, were helping them all communicate better. But peace never lasts long in New York high society. The trouble started at Emily's 7th birthday party. They'd decided to have one big celebration at Victoria's house, with both families present. Everything was going fine until Richard, Victoria's husband, had too much to drink. "Look at you all playing happy families," he sneered, cornering Ethan by the pool. You think you've won, don't you? Getting Victoria to agree to this custody nonsense. This isn't about winning, Ethan said quietly. It's about Emily. It's always about Emily with you. Maybe if you'd been this invested when you were married to Victoria, don't. Ethan's voice was dangerous, but Richard was too drunk to notice the warning. You know what's funny? Victoria only married me to make you jealous. And now look, she's practically begging to spend time with you and your new charity case. Ethan's fist connected with Richard's jaw before anyone could stop him. Richard stumbled backward, falling into the pool with a splash that sent children screaming and parents gasping. "Daddy!" Emily cried, running to the pool's edge. "Stop it!" Victoria grabbed her daughter, pulling her back. "Richard, get out of that pool right now!" Brielle rushed to Ethan, grabbing his arm before he could do more damage. "Think about Emily," she whispered. "This isn't helping." The party dissolved into chaos. As security escorted Richard out, he was already on his phone with his lawyer. Victoria was crying, Emily was inconsolable, and the other parents were hurrying their children away from the scene. Later that night, after they'd gotten Emily to sleep at their apartment, Brielle confronted Ethan. "You could have ruined everything. Today, the custody agreement, the peace with Victoria, he called you a charity case." Ethan's hands were still shaking with rage. "I don't care what he calls me. We've worked too hard for this, Ethan. Emily needs stability." But stability wasn't in the cards. The next morning, Victoria showed up at their door in tears. "Richard's filing for divorce," she said, collapsing onto their couch, "and he's threatening to expose everything." "What do you mean, everything?" Brielle asked. Victoria looked at Ethan. "He knows about the money. The real reason I left you." Ethan went pale. "Victoria, don't. She deserves to know, Ethan, especially now." Brielle looked between them. "Know what?" Victoria took a deep breath. "The affair you thought I had, the one that ended our marriage, it never happened. Ethan made it up." The room went silent. Brielle felt her world tilting again. "I needed a reason," Ethan said quietly. "The company was going under. I'd made some bad investments trying to expand too fast. Victoria found out I'd been moving money around, hiding losses from the board. She threatened to expose me. So you destroyed my reputation first," Victoria finished. "Made everyone believe I was the villain. And when the company miraculously recovered a year later, I let everyone think you'd taken half my fortune in the divorce," Ethan said, "when really you took the blame for my mistakes." Brielle stood up slowly. "So everything, the revenge marriage, using me to hurt Victoria, it was all based on a lie? Brielle, please. Did anyone ever tell the truth in this family?" She grabbed her purse, heading for the door. "I need some air." She walked for hours through Central Park, her mind spinning. Every time she thought she understood this world she'd married into, another layer of deception emerged. Her phone kept buzzing. Texts from Ethan, from Victoria, even from Charlotte. She ignored them all. As the sun set, she found herself at the lake, watching families feed the ducks. A little girl Emily's age was laughing as her parents swung her between them. Her phone rang again. This time it was Emily. "Mommy B?" The little girl's voice was small and scared. "Are you coming home?" Brielle's heart clenched. When had she become Mommy B? When had this complicated, messy family become hers? "Richard's being mean to Mommy," Emily continued, "and Daddy's really sad. Please come home." In the background, she could hear Victoria and Ethan arguing. "You had no right to tell her. She deserves to know what kind of man you really are. Oh, like you're so innocent in all this." "Emily, sweetheart," Brielle said softly, "put me on speaker." The arguing voices got louder. "Both of you, stop." Brielle's voice cut through their fight. "You're scaring Emily. Again." Silence fell. "I'm coming home," she said. "And when I get there, we're all going to sit down and tell the whole truth, every ugly bit of it. Because I'm done with lies and I'm done with secrets. If we're going to be a family, all of us, we start fresh. Tonight." She hung up and stared at her reflection in the lake. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who'd fallen for Ethan's pretty lies all those months ago. She was stronger, now wiser. And maybe, just maybe, she was exactly what this broken family needed to heal. That night's conversation changed everything. They sat in Ethan's living room until dawn, Emily asleep upstairs, while years of lies unraveled. The company was in trouble, Ethan explained, his voice hoarse. We'd expanded too fast, taken too many risks. When the market crashed, we were exposed. Victoria sat rigid on the couch, her makeup smeared from crying. I found the books, saw how bad it really was. If it came out, everyone would lose their jobs, not just the executives, but thousands of workers. So you took the fall, Brielle said. Let everyone think you'd had affairs, broken up the marriage. It was my idea, Victoria admitted. Better to be seen as an unfaithful wife than watch the company collapse. The divorce settlement was really money to keep the company afloat until the market recovered. And Richard? Victoria laughed bitterly. He was supposed to be my fresh start. Rich, powerful, everything I thought I wanted. I didn't know he'd use Emily as a weapon. Brielle's head was spinning. But why keep lying? Why the whole revenge scheme with me? Ethan couldn't meet her eyes. Because I was angry. Not at Victoria, at myself. I'd nearly lost everything through my own mistakes. When I met you, you were so genuine, so different from our world. I thought using you would hurt Victoria, but really, I was trying to hurt myself by marrying someone you thought was beneath you. No. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. By marrying someone better than I deserved. A door creaked upstairs. Emily stood there in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Is everyone still fighting? She asked in a small voice. Victoria opened her arms. No, baby, we're just talking, trying to fix things. Emily ran to her mother, then looked at Brielle. Can I have two mummies, like Sarah at school? The adults exchanged glances. In that moment, something shifted. Come here, sweetie, Brielle said. Emily climbed into her lap. Families come in all shapes and sizes. What matters is that we love each other, even when we make mistakes. Victoria wiped fresh tears. Richard's lawyer's called. He's demanding full custody. Over my dead body, Ethan growled. No, Brielle's voice was firm. No more fighting, no more schemes. We do this right. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Richard tried to paint Victoria as an unfit mother, dredging up the old affair allegations. But this time they were ready. In court, Victoria told the truth. All of it. About the company's near collapse, about sacrificing her reputation to save thousands of jobs, about Richard's manipulation and abuse. The judge was particularly interested in Richard's drunken behavior at Emily's party. When Brielle took the stand, she spoke about watching Emily flourish under the new custody arrangement, about the importance of having both parents and bonus parents in her life. Your Honor, she said, I didn't ask to be part of this family. In fact, I was brought into it under false pretenses. But now that I'm here, I'm fighting for what's best for Emily. And what's best is having all of us work together. Richard's case crumbled. The judge awarded joint custody to Victoria and Ethan, with liberal visitation rights for Brielle. Richard was limited to supervised visits. Outside the courthouse, photographers swarmed them. For once, nobody cared about the scandal or the drama. The pictures showed something different. Emily holding hands with both her mothers, Ethan's arm protectively around all of them. Unconventional family wins landmark custody case, the headlines read. That night, they had a small celebration at Ethan and Brielle's apartment. Emily fell asleep on the couch between her parents, a peaceful smile on her face. What happens now? Victoria asked softly. Brielle looked at her husband, then at the woman who'd gone from enemy to unexpected ally. Now we build something new, something real. Together, Ethan added, squeezing her hand. Victoria nodded, touching Emily's hair gently. Together. Later, after Victoria had taken Emily home, Ethan found Brielle on their balcony. I keep waiting. For you to leave, he admitted. After everything you've learned, everything I did. The man who married me for revenge isn't the man I see now, she said. People change, Ethan. Sometimes they even change for the better. He pulled her close, breathing in her familiar scent. I love you. The real kind. The kind that terrifies me because I know I don't deserve it. Maybe that's why you do. She kissed him softly. Because you finally understand what love really means. Inside, their phones buzzed with a text from Victoria. A photo of Emily tucked into bed, clutching the photo of all four of them at the courthouse. This was their family now. Messy, complicated, built on lies, but saved by truth. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. 6 months after the custody battle, their lives had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Then Richard showed up at Ethan's office with an envelope. "You think you've won," he said, dropping the envelope on Ethan's desk. "But I've been doing some digging." Inside were photos, old ones from before Ethan's first marriage. They showed him with Marcus Chen, Brielle's current boss. "Interesting coincidence," Richard smirked. "Your new wife just happens to work for your old college roommate, the same roommate who helped you hide money during the company's collapse." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Get out." I wonder what the SEC would think about all this. Or better yet, what Brielle would think when she learns. Her dream job wasn't exactly earned. After Richard left, Ethan called Marcus in panic. "He knows," Ethan said, "about everything. Impossible. Those records were destroyed." "Not all of them, apparently. He has photos of us from college." Marcus swore. "What does he want?" "What everyone wants: money, power, revenge. We can't let him expose this. Brielle would never forgive you, but it was too late." Richard had already sent copies to every major newspaper in New York. Brielle was working late when the story broke. Her phone exploded with notifications. There in black and white was the truth. Her job, her success, all orchestrated by Ethan. She stormed into his office, throwing the newspaper on his desk. "Tell me this isn't true." Ethan looked defeated. "I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you arranged my entire career. How every success I thought I earned was just another manipulation. I only asked Marcus to give you a chance. Everything after that was all you. Was anything in my life real? Or was it all just part of your grand plan?" Before he could answer, Victoria burst in. "Have you seen the news? Richard's talking to the SEC. He's threatening to expose everything, not just the company fraud, but how we covered it up." Brielle laughed bitterly. "More lies. Why am I not surprised?" "Brielle, please," Ethan begged. "I was trying to protect you." "Protect me by controlling every aspect of my life." She turned to leave, but Victoria grabbed her arm. "Wait, there's more. Richard, he's taking Emily to London. Tonight." The world stopped. "What?" "He got an emergency order from a different judge. Claimed we were all unfit parents involved in financial fraud." Ethan was already on the phone with his lawyers. Brielle stood frozen, her personal betrayal forgotten. "When's their flight?" she asked. 2 hours. JFK. Brielle grabbed her keys. "Call airport security. I'll meet you there." She raced through Manhattan traffic, lights blurring through her tears. Emily's voice echoed in her head. "Mommy B, don't let him take me." At the airport, she spotted them, Richard dragging a crying Emily toward security. "Let her go," Brielle shouted. Heads turned, security approached. "This doesn't concern you," Richard sneered. "You're not her real mother." Emily broke free, running to Brielle. "Don't let him take me. He says I'll never see Mommy or Daddy again." Airport police surrounded them. Victoria and Ethan arrived with their lawyers and the original custody order. Richard was arrested for attempted kidnapping. As they led him away, he shouted, "You're all going down. The SEC will destroy you." Hours later, they sat in Ethan's living room. Emily was asleep upstairs, exhausted from the ordeal. "We have to tell her the truth," Victoria said quietly. "About everything," Brielle agreed. "No more lies." Ethan took her hand. "I'm sorry. About Marcus, about the job. I saw how talented you were, how much potential you had. I wanted to give you the chance you deserved. That wasn't your choice to make. I know, just like it wasn't our choice to let Victoria take the blame for the company's problems. We've all been playing God with each other's lives." Victoria stood. "Then maybe it's time we stopped, all of us." The next morning, they called a press conference. Together, they told the whole truth about the company's near collapse, about Victoria's sacrifice, about Ethan's manipulations. Brielle watched her husband confess his sins to the world, saw the tears in Victoria's eyes as she reclaimed her reputation. The scandal would be enormous. The SEC investigation was inevitable, but as Emily squeezed her hand, Brielle realized something. Sometimes you had to tear everything down to build something stronger. "What happens now?" Emily asked. Brielle looked at her family, her mess of how family, built on lies but standing together in truth. Now we start over, the right way. The SEC investigation hit hard. Ethan stepped down as CEO and the company's stock plummeted. Reporters camped outside their building day and night, hoping to catch the family in another scandal. Marcus was arrested for his role in the financial cover-up. Brielle resigned from her job, unable to face her co-workers after learning the truth. About her position, "I've lost everything again," Ethan said one night, staring out their bedroom window. "Not everything," Brielle replied, thinking of Emily asleep down the hall. Victoria moved into their guest house temporarily, wanting to keep Emily's routine as normal as possible during the crisis. The media dubbed them New York's most scandalous family, but for once none of them cared about public opinion. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Amy, Brielle's former co-worker, sent her a USB drive found in Marcus's old office. "You need to see this," the note read. The files revealed that Richard had been embezzling money from his own company for years. His pursuit of Victoria, the marriage, the custody battle, it was all part of a scheme to access the Remington fortune. "He needed my reputation destroyed," Victoria realized, reviewing the documents. "So no one would believe me if I discovered what he was doing." They took the evidence to the SEC. Richard was arrested trying to flee the country with millions in stolen funds, but the victory felt hollow. Ethan still faced charges for the original financial fraud. The company was in shambles. Brielle's career was tainted by association. One morning, she found Victoria in the kitchen, crying over a cup of coffee. "I should have told the truth years." "Here goes," Victoria said, "about the company, about Richard. Maybe then none of this would have happened." "We all should have told the truth," Brielle replied, "but we can't change the past." Emily came downstairs, looking small in her school uniform. "Are they going to take Daddy away like they took Richard?" The two women exchanged glances. "How do you explain white-collar crime to a 7-year-old? Come here, sweetie," Brielle said, pulling Emily into her lap. "Remember when you broke Mommy's favorite vase and tried to hide it?" Emily nodded. "And remember how much better things were after you told the truth, even though you got in trouble? Is that what Daddy did? Tell the truth, even though he'll get in trouble?" "Yes, baby," Victoria said softly. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes too. Big ones, but telling the truth is always brave." That afternoon, Ethan met with federal prosecutors. He offered a full confession, agreed to pay back every penny, and provided evidence against others involved in the fraud. In exchange, he would serve just 1 year in prison. The night before he had to report to the minimum security facility, they had a family dinner. Emily insisted on making her father's favorite spaghetti, even though most of it ended up on the floor. "Promise you'll write every day," she demanded. "Twice a day," Ethan assured her, "and you can visit on weekends." After Emily went to bed, the adult sat in heavy silence. "I'll look after them," Victoria promised. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Brielle took his hand. "1 year," she said. "We can survive 1 year." "Why are you still here?" he asked suddenly. "After everything I did, all the lies." "Because the man going to prison tomorrow isn't the same man who married me for revenge. That man would never have confessed, never have put his family before his pride." Victoria touched his arm. "We'll keep the company running." The board agreed to let me step in as interim CEO. "And I've been offered a teaching position at NYU Business School," Brielle added. "Teaching ethics, if you can believe it." Ethan laughed through his tears. God has a sense of humor. The next morning, they all drove him to the prison. Emily clung to him, refusing to let go until the guards gently insisted. "Take care of our girls," he told Brielle and Victoria. As they watched him walk away, Emily between them holding both their hands, Brielle realized something extraordinary. The family that had started with lies and revenge had become something true and precious. They had one hard year ahead, but they would face it together, bound not by blood or marriage certificates, but by choice and love and hard-won truth. That night, Emily insisted on sleeping in the master bedroom. As Brielle held Her stepdaughter Victoria curled up on the other side. She thought about the strange path that had led them here. "Mommy B," Emily whispered in the dark. "Yes, sweetheart. Are we still a family, even with Daddy gone?" "More than ever," Victoria answered, "because now we're a family built on truth." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, promising that even the darkest nights would eventually end. 1 year. They could survive 1 year, and maybe, just maybe, they would emerge stronger for having faced their demons together. 10 months into Ethan's sentence, Victoria got the call that would change everything again. Richard had died in prison, heart attack. Brielle found Victoria sitting in the garden, clutching the phone. "What's wrong?" "He left a confession," Victoria said numbly. "About everything, things we didn't even know." The confession revealed that Richard had orchestrated the entire collapse of Ethan's company years ago. He'd manipulated the market, planted false information, all to force Ethan into desperate measures. He wanted revenge, Victoria read from the documents his lawyers sent. Because 20 years ago, Ethan's father chose Ethan to run the company instead of him. All those years of lies, pain, and broken trust, stemming from one man's wounded pride. Emily was at school when the news broke. Headlines screamed, "Convicted financier's deathbed confession exonerates Remington family." Brielle and Victoria rushed to the prison with the evidence. The prosecutors agreed to review Ethan's case immediately. 2 weeks later, he walked free. The media gathered outside the prison gates, but they only had eyes for each other. Emily ran into his arms, then pulled Brielle and Victoria into the hug. "My girls," he whispered. "All my girls." At home, they faced the aftermath. The company stock soared with news of Ethan's exoneration. Victoria's reputation was restored. Even Brielle's career took an unexpected turn. Her ethics classes at NYU had become the most popular in the business school. But the biggest change was in their family. "I want to adopt Emily," Brielle said one night. "Legally, if you both agree." Victoria and Ethan exchanged looks. "I was thinking the same thing," Victoria admitted. "She needs both her mothers, officially." The adoption ceremony was small, just family and close friends. Emily wore a princess dress and couldn't stop smiling. "Now everyone knows what I knew all along," she declared, "that I have the best family ever." That night after Emily was asleep, the 3 adults sat in the garden. "Remember when you married me for revenge?" Brielle asked Ethan. He winced. "Not my finest moment." "I think the universe had other plans," Victoria mused. "All our schemes and lies led to something true." Ethan took Brielle's hand. "I didn't deserve you then. I'm still not sure I deserve you now." "Maybe that's not the point," Brielle said softly. "Maybe love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I choose this. All of this." Victoria raised her wine glass. "2 choices, and second chances. And truth," Ethan added. "And family." Emily's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her pajamas, grinning. "The best, most complicated family ever." They laughed and made room for her on the patio sofa. Above them, stars twinkled in the New York sky. The same stars that had witnessed their schemes and lies now watched over their healing and truth. Brielle looked at her husband, who had grown from a vengeful man into someone worthy of love. At Victoria, once her perceived enemy, now her closest, friend and co-parent. At Emily, the child who had brought them all together. This wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined when Ethan first proposed in that restaurant so long ago. It was better. It was real. "Tell me the story again," Emily yawned, curling up between her parents. "About how our family came true." Brielle smiled. "Well, once upon a time, a man married a woman for all the wrong reasons, but it turned into all the right reasons," Emily finished sleepily. "Yes," Ethan said, meeting Brielle's eyes over their daughter's head. "That's exactly what happened. In the soft garden lights, surrounded by the family they'd built from broken pieces, they finally understood. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't start with love at all. Sometimes they start with mistakes, with schemes, with revenge. But if you're brave enough to face the truth, to fight for what matters, to choose love over pride, that's when the real fairy tale begins." 1 year after Ethan's release, the Remington Carter Foundation hosted its first charity gala. The foundation's mission was simple: supporting families torn apart by white-collar crime. Brielle stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. She'd come so far from the insecure woman Ethan had married for revenge. "Our story isn't unique," she began. "Every day families are destroyed by greed, lies, and revenge. But tonight we're here to prove that healing is possible." Victoria sat in the front row holding Emily's hand. At 10 years old, Emily had grown into a confident young girl who understood more than most kids her age. Ethan watched his wife speak, with pride in his eyes. The company was thriving under their shared leadership, him as CEO, Victoria as CFO, and Brielle heading their charitable initiatives. "When my husband married me," Brielle continued, "it was part of a revenge scheme. A way to hurt his ex-wife, but life had other plans." The audience laughed knowingly. Their story had become legendary in New York society. Tonight, we're announcing our first initiative, the Second Chance Scholarship, for children whose parents are incarcerated for financial crimes, giving them the opportunity for education and healing. The applause was thunderous. Emily beamed as she joined her parents, all three of them, on stage. Later that night at home, Emily had a request. "Can we have a baby brother or sister?" The adults nearly choked on their coffee. "Sweetheart," Victoria started, but Emily wasn't finished. "I mean, we already have 2 mums and a dad. Why not add more?" Brielle and Ethan exchanged glances. They hadn't told anyone yet, but... "Actually," Brielle said softly, touching her stomach, "we have some news." Victoria screamed in delight. Emily jumped up and down. "When?" they both asked. "January," Ethan said, pulling Brielle close. "A New Year's baby." Victoria hugged them both. "I call dibs on godmother." As they celebrated, Brielle caught her reflection in the window. She saw a strong woman who had turned pain into purpose, a woman who had learned that real love isn't about revenge or power or social status. The pregnancy announcement made headlines: "Remington heir expecting, America's most unconventional family grows." But they didn't care about headlines anymore. They had something better: truth, trust, and a love story that had started with revenge, but ended with redemption. 9 months later, they welcomed twins, a boy and a girl. Emily proudly helped name them Hope and Truth Remington. "Because that's what our family is built on now," she said wisely. The nurses were confused by the family dynamic, 2 mothers hovering over the babies while the father filmed everything. But the Remingtons were used to confused looks by now. 5 years later, Brielle sat in their garden, watching Emily help the twins with their homework. Victoria was cooking dinner in the kitchen, and Ethan was teaching Hope to ride her bike. "Mommy B," Truth called out, "tell us the story again." "Which one, sweetheart?" "The one about how you and Daddy fell in love. The real way, not the fake way." Brielle smiled, gathering her children close. She caught Ethan's eye across the yard, saw Victoria watching from the kitchen window. "Well," she began, "once upon a time, there was a man who thought revenge was more important than love." "But he was wrong," the twins chorused. "Yes, he was wrong. Because sometimes the best love stories start in the strangest ways. Sometimes you have to get lost before you can be found." Emily joined them, knowing the story by heart. "And sometimes you get more family than you ever dreamed of." Ethan and Victoria came to join them in the garden, their unconventional family complete. "And they all lived happily ever after?" Hope asked. Brielle looked at her husband, who had learned to love truly, at Victoria, who had become her sister in all but blood, at their children who knew only love, not labels. "No," she said softly, "they lived truthfully ever after, and that's even better than happy." The New York sun set behind them, painting the sky in colors of promise. Their story had become a modern fairy tale, not about perfect princes or flawless princesses, but about real people who learned that love is more powerful than revenge. And somewhere in the heart of the city, a new story was beginning. But that's another tale for another time.